Okay, guys, first episode of Step on Foot with me, Marco, Kevin, and Luke. So, this is going to be just a talk about football, about the latest happenings in football, what's going on. So, first off, I'm just going to start with a bit about myself. I've been a Milan fan since 2010. I haven't seen a lot of Milan's good fortunes, unfortunately, especially in the Champions League. But I'm still here, and unfortunately, I'd say I'm still supporting those damn rossoneri. And now I'm going to introduce Luke because he is also a Serie A fan. I think too much of a Serie A fan. We might agree about that. And he supports, a team that I'll leave him to do the talking because it's might come across as a bit offensive.
Following up to what Marco said, I think it's going to be a different side to what I'm going to talk about, basically, because he went on the negative side on Milan, and I'm a bit of more of a positive side with regards to Roma, because even though we are a team that we haven't won that many trophies, I'm still quite on the positive side with regards to my
And
team.
that's to be honest very interesting because it might sound a bit snobby, but the fact that Milan has won so much in its history has made most fans, including me, with very high expectations. And then there are other teams where they'd be happy to just qualify for the Champions League and even win a Conference League, maybe.
To quote one of my favorite players, apart from Totti and De Rossi, better one here than 10 over there. So our love for the team is pure love, even if they don't win. So it's fine.
That's fair enough, to be honest.
We're trying to change the
narrative,
the script now. Exactly.
And which trophy are you trying to win this year? The Europa League, maybe? I mean, you aren't too bad there in the Europa League. The chances of Roma, qualifying. But before going into that, let's just move on. Yes, let's move on to the Premier League, where Kevin supports Manchester City. Just went to see them yesterday, or the day before actually, against Real Madrid. Unfortunately, not a good result for him, but quite a recent fan of Manchester City, because before you used to support Panathinaikos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny, before I leave things to you, Kevin, is that Panathinaikos are in the Conference League or European?
Conference League. Conference League.
So
Europa League.
Because
we played against them.
They play Real Betis.
So I remember you saying that they wanted to almost kill the president when they Panathinaikos fans, when you supported them. Mm-hmm. But ever since you stopped supporting them, they did have a change of fortune, and they're now in the Europa League, which, what's up with that?
They're doing quite well, I think. It's still quite a very toxic fan base. So at one point you're doing well, you're a club legend, and then next week you miss a penalty and they want to cut your head off. So it's the case in point is a Polish striker that they have. He came in, scored a couple of goals. He's the new face of the team. Then he missed a couple of chances. It was out, tear up his contract.
Maybe it's just the ultras or something like that, because that talk is usually coming from, I see it happen with Milan as well, when one good performance, or one bad performance rather, means that the player must leave the club and things like that. But
I think it's the
Yeah.
case for most of the teams that really want to perform. For example, I was seeing Gasperini's press conference yesterday. A Roman journalist asked him, "Do you know? Are you on social media?" And Gasperini said no. And he told him basically, "Do you know about the Roman tifosi life cycle and what is it?" So basically, it's see you at Circo Massico, which means we're going to win the league. We're going to win the league, and then the life cycle is kind of I want him out, Gasperini out. I want that player out. So I think it's it's quite.
It's a very
very
toxic
Yeah,
way
exactly.
of living the sport and supporting your club, to be honest. But I mean, the problem is when you give too much, you know, thought, like brain power to that kind of thing when you see it online and things like that. Recently, when I use Twitter and like my feed is full of Milan, you know, tweets and fan bases talking about Milan, things like that. And I've recently started filtering it out because it's very black and white. It's a very black and white way of, you know, watching the sport. There's not enough room for nuance and, you know, understanding what's going on really and truly and how to objectively kind of, you know, evaluate results. Okay, so we can actually start off on the last result for Manchester City, which wasn't obviously too good for you, Kevin. 5-1 on aggregate against Real Madrid. You actually went to see the return leg where Manchester City practically saw their chances slip away immediately with Bernardo Silva's red card. Now, like in live when you were watching it, did you think that it was a red card? What did you think happened? Because it happened really quickly.
It was.
It was a red card, yeah.
Hands were behind his back, but he put out his elbow and he blocked the ball. So
There was a chance that it actually wasn't even going to happen because of an offside claim at first. I think it was Vinicius Jr. or someone else who was thought to be deemed offside, but when I saw it, I saw, like, I kind of had a feeling and that the game was over in that very moment because, you know, once one player sees a red card from either team, the game is usually over. And this was something that happened also to AS Roma, our beloved team there against Como, but we'll talk about that later on. But yeah, overall 5 goals conceded against Real Madrid, which, I mean, in 2 games it's like it's not crazy bad, but still the fact that you guys only managed to score 1 goal. Haaland did score, as you can see, 41st minute, scuffed tap in, if I could say that. Yeah, what's going on with City's attack right now, do you think?
I think it's a mental issue above anything else. I think they're not there mentally, I feel, somehow. Like you could see after the first goal, everyone just shut down. And we weren't like this last year or the years before.
Or even
They
at
would
the
actually-
beginning of the season, there were times where you guys were actually like completely flying in terms of goals. And if I've seen both games, both Real Madrid, City, and the return leg, and it almost kind of felt like the same exact start. City started off on the right foot, attacking, couldn't make the most of their chances, conceded a goal, and it all went downhill there. And it's a problem. It's a problem because in the Champions League, no team is going to allow you that kind of luxury of missing chances and still making it through, especially Real Madrid, who are like the masters of the Champions League. Do you think it's Haaland? Would you point the blame on Haaland or Guardiola for not managing to make a good concoction of, you know, attacking potential and just make things work? What do you think is going on?
I don't think that a player can go from scoring that many goals to nothing in a season. So I don't think it's a Haaland issue. You don't become bad.
I agree, to be honest.
In a season. So the quality is definitely there. I think it's a locker room issue. It's a mental thing.
I think tactically there are some things that we can shift the blame on Guardiola for. Because even when you guys attack, when Manchester City carries the attack forward, I'm not seeing a fluid concept of attacking football. It's a lot of, and it's always been the case, right? With a lot of possession, pinging the ball from one end to the other, then, trying to find that incisive ball towards the attack, towards Haaland usually. But it's not happening. It's not happening. I'm seeing Haaland a bit depressed. I'm seeing him shake his head off, and I'm seeing him not for a lack of belief. Maybe it's frustration that good balls aren't coming his way. Luke, did you see the City Real game? What do you think was going on there?
Before I go into the games, I think if we have to go in a bit into Haaland, I think we all have Haaland in our fantasy Premier League teams, right? I mean,
For now.
for now, I think he has been suffering a bit of a season where he had like an injury that he wasn't given the right amount of time to get better, and because let's face it, there's no one better in the team than Haaland to score goals. And Marmoush went to the Africa Cup of Nations, so basically there was no one to replace him. So I think he's a player right now that on and off suffering from he didn't have the right amount of time to rest and get back. And I think Guardiola, okay, we can go into his tactics, but as Kevin said, he's in the type of player that last year he was the best striker in the league, and now he just can't score. So I think it's a bit of an issue of him being physically ready to play the amount of games that City are playing. Let's also take into consideration that Norway have qualified for the World Cup,
exactly.
and he played every game for Norway, and he was a beast. He played against Italy. He was amazing.
But
So
I'm going to stop you a
think-
bit here, Luke, because the thing is that I'm not, maybe this is subjective, obviously, but I'm not seeing Haaland tired. I don't see him really struggle physically. The thing is, he's not even getting any chances. He's not even being served well. And we can kind of try to find out why that is. Foden, for example, MIA, missing in action. Where is he? Where is his form? Zero. Completely hasn't even... Like, did he even play against Real Madrid? I'm not sure if he even was subbed on. No. Semenyo has been a star, hit the ground running immediately. But still, it doesn't seem, even when I see City play, even against West Ham in the weekend, another bad result, 1-1 draw there, still I didn't see him have a load of chances like he used to have before. And this guy, as good as he is, if you're not giving him the ball, how is he going to score? So what's missing? Maybe it's not Haaland, maybe it's someone else. Maybe we can point to the fact that there isn't Foden there, but there are many other players. I mean, Guardiola has been given the benefit of being, granted a trove of attacking talent, be it Cherky, be it, Semenyo. So maybe it's not Haaland that is the problem. Kevin, what do you think?
No, I don't think it's Haaland. I think it's the players around him. We are missing that Kevin De Bruyne in the middle that moves the whole team around.
There is Bernardo Silva, so his last season probably they're saying at City. So
I think that position it had to be Reinders to fill in KDB's shoes. So and obviously hasn't been on the same level. So I think Reinders is one of the most players that is supposed to be kind of like the fulcrum of the City team, and he isn't performing at least to what they thought.
I think we'll have to see Reinders next season, because this was the first season. It was always going to be a big challenge for him to adapt from the Serie A to the Premier League. Am I convinced that he is as good of a replacement as KDB to fill his boots?
Definitely not.
I don't think so personally. I think that, and I've said this to you guys multiple times, as a Milan fan, I've seen him play for a couple of seasons with us. A great player when there are spaces, but when there aren't spaces, he's going to struggle a lot. And you need guys who know how to find that space, like Kevin De Bruyne and maybe other players that we're not mentioning maybe. So this is a cause for thought. It has also, we have to see whether Guardiola even stays for with City for the next year. So who do you fancy, Kev, as a coach for Manchester City if Guardiola were to leave?
I think the obvious option would be Maresca.
Despite
He's a-
Chelsea's, spotty performances.
He's a product of Pep, like Arteta. So Arteta, I mean, despite everything, doing well with Arsenal. Maresca won trophies with Chelsea. They didn't do as good as Chelsea should do, but they did okay. And I think with the players that he would have at City, I think he would do well.
And let's say that Maresca for some reason doesn't join. Who would you appoint as a City manager if he wouldn't work out?
Good question.
But it's a very tough one to answer.
Can I change the question just a bit?
Uh-huh.
To help Kevin out. Hypothetically, if you had to take Arteta to City,
I would.
Okay.
I would.
It's very interesting given your distaste towards Arsenal, let's just say that.
Apart from the fact that he's a good coach, you can see what he's doing with Arsenal. He's a product of Pep. So, and he's worked with the backroom staff, not all of them obviously, but some of the backroom staff, some of the players, he knows the players.
What's interesting is that even though he's a product of Pep Guardiola, Arteta's playing some very different football from what Guardiola plays at Arsenal. Arsenal's kind of method of approaching the game is completely different from Manchester City's. So it will be a shift. I mean, this won't happen, right? Arteta to City from Arsenal, but
you never know. You never know.
You never know. Yeah. But on the topic of Chelsea, seeing as we mentioned them, they lost to a resounding PSG, 8-2 on aggregate, 3 goals in Stamford Bridge. Kvaratskhelia, Barcola, Mayulu in the 62nd minute. I didn't watch this game, I'll be honest, but I was still surprised to see PSG walk over Chelsea really and truly, especially after a pretty good start from Liam Rosenoir's initial stages to Chelsea. And now, after a 5-2 loss to PSG, then came a 3-0 loss to PSG, a loss to Newcastle in between the two games. Do you think there's cause for concern, Luke, when it comes to Chelsea's fan base?
Okay, so I follow Chelsea for all the wrong reasons, and
hate watching probably.
No. I have an idea about Chelsea, about their background and their history and whatever. If we had to go into Chelsea nowadays, I think that what happened. Okay, Chelsea is being run by someone, in my opinion, that is more on the financial side rather than the football side, and that makes a very big difference. So they brought in Maresca after, they brought him to bring in a young team, and he won the Conference League and the Club World Cup, which we all have maybe our opinions on that competition. But I think that the PSG side that beat Chelsea proves that the Chelsea that played in the summer against PSG was a different side to even PSG were a different side to what they were in the summer and what they are now. They had won everything last year, and now PSG basically just they are a different beast. They are a team that have a very good coach. So I can't say that I'm surprised really that PSG beat Chelsea in this way.
Yeah,
because
I mean, to be honest, the surprise for me isn't that PSG knocked Chelsea out. I mean, that could happen, but 8-2 on aggregate, Luke.
The thing is that I think that the first game, similar to City and Real, the first game They were, if I'm not mistaken, 2-2, and it went from 2-2 to 5-2 in like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And that shows mentally that the coach, the players, they're not ready to maybe kind of confront these kind of games in a certain way. Because if you have to understand that you're playing against a very good team away from home, and if you are 2-2, maybe you have to defend better. I mean, Kvaratskhelia goal was incredible, but you have to defend better the result in order to take something back home. So I think it comes down to the manager. They brought in someone from Strasbourg who is their sister club. It was a quick fix after Maresca, and I don't think he's very dramatic.
I mean, you say a quick fix, but the thing is that they've given him a very long contract, from what I understand, right? 5 years.
Yes, but that's like the Chelsea way to go now, in order to avoid FFP and all these regulations. They found a loophole, and they gave Mudryk an 8-year contract, and most of them he's out for. Okay, let's not go into it because he's still outside.
A big can of worms, that, yeah. But going forward, what can you expect from Chelsea now? Like, what would you say are the requirements? Like a top 4 finish. What else? I mean, something realistic given the players.
For the Premier League, it is they are in an advantageous position because they can finish at 5th and still qualify for the Champions League, which is something that Italy had 2 years ago, and it was obviously something that they deserved. Okay, but if they finish 5th, they qualify for the Champions League, and I think they've reached their goal. I think that is their goal now, because they were eliminated by Arsenal in the Cup semi-final, out of the Champions League with PSG after spending an incredible amount of billions. So I think if you do not finish 5th, obviously they have to look into other people to coach a team next year. I think knowing Chelsea, even if they finish 5th, they still might consider other candidates. But if you do not finish 5th, yeah, definitely.
Like right now, Chelsea are 6th, 48 points. Liverpool is 5th with 49. At Chelsea's heels, there is Brentford with 45 points, but obviously Brentford just suffered. I'd say suffered because it was a pretty bad result against Wolves at home. So Chelsea should be obviously looking forward instead of backwards when it comes to the league standings. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it would be a bit of a disaster to not see Chelsea in the Champions League next year, even given, as you said, that 5 places now, the Premier League has 5 whole places for the Champions League.
The amount of money that they spent over the last 5 years is...
as Serie A fans, we can only dream of spending half as much in a summer.
I think but that's the thing. It's crazy, but
I mean,
if you spend this amount of money, you expect to win everything. The return on investment on the players you sign, the wages you're giving them, it's no question that you should win everything.
I expected Chelsea to be in a much better position than they are today with the amount of money that they spent. Something clearly went wrong, in my opinion. Obviously, a Chelsea fan might not agree with me, but at the end of the day, that is how I see it. If you spend that amount of money and you're not in the semi-final of the Champions League every year, then
I mean, to be fair, I wouldn't really say that the more you spend, like spending equals, if you spend a bunch of money, you have to at least be in the semi-final or whatever, because there are a multitude of factors that also count. The coach, how the coach goes on, integrates the players well, but still I agree with the sentiment that even now, that the fact that Chelsea have so many, given that they're giving out contracts, like 8-year contracts to players, they have a bunch of players on their payroll now. And for a new coach to kind of assimilate and get to know his players, like to be fair, right? Rosenoir, like, this isn't Rosenoir's perfect Chelsea. It's not his Chelsea, at least. The players that are there weren't chosen by him. So I wouldn't give him some slack on that, but I think that there should be definitely better results given the talent that Chelsea have shown. But I'm not sure. Maybe we have to wait till next year, maybe, where some new players, some Rosenoir rubber-stamped players will join the team, and maybe he'll manage to gel the team better. I'm not sure if you guys agree with that kind of optimistic thought for Chelsea fans.
I do think coaches do need their own sort of touch in a team. Same with Liverpool. Slot won the league with a club team, and then he started to form it, making it his own. And then you can see the point where that shift happened. So I think a coach, to prove his worth at least, needs to have his own team, form it, and perform with his team.
Yeah, and speaking of Liverpool, they beat Galatasaray 4-0 yesterday, making the aggregate a 4-1 win for them. I watched the game, and because it was the only kind of competitive game that was left, seeing as Barcelona trashed Newcastle, Bayern did the same to Atalanta. Atletico Madrid did a similar job to Tottenham, although not as big of a kind of result. But I'm not sure if you guys saw the match, but Liverpool had Galatasaray settled pretty quickly, and I also kind of knew that something similar was going to happen, given that I've watched also the Juventus Galatasaray game in the previous game week of the Champions League, and Galatasaray away from home, guys, is not the same team as it is at home. Even against a 10-man Juventus, really, they offered really nothing in terms of attack, trying to defend all the time. And trying to do that against a Liverpool side that's boasting a bunch of skillful players, a very, heated atmosphere there at Anfield. I'm not sure, Luke, if you've seen the maybe Juventus Galatasaray game and kind of could draw your conclusions from Galatasaray's away record from there. But what do you think of the final 4-0 result? Is it too much, or?
Okay, so I saw both the games that Galatasaray played against Juventus, and I saw the games that Galatasaray played against Liverpool. From what I saw, I think that basically Galatasaray, when you're playing in Turkey, it is a bit of a hostile environment. It's not obviously an environment that you can't get the result in, but it's obviously quite of a heated place to play your away game in. I think Galatasaray have in Osimhen a very good offensive unit. They can score goals, but even Icardi, he didn't play yesterday. But they can't defend. So I think Juventus lost the game in the first game when it finished at a very, very surprising score. And Liverpool were able to turn around the result because it was a reasonable result, 1-0 to take it back at Anfield, but Juventus just couldn't. So I think that's the narrative basically of the two games. Galatasaray are a good team, but Liverpool were better. I think Juventus are still better, but obviously that one game in Turkey just.
And seeing as Liverpool drew the game against Tottenham in the 90-something minutes to Richarlison's goal, do you think that Galatasaray, if they were more brave, could they have actually played a braver game and gotten a result against Liverpool? I mean, I don't think that it was an impossible task, even given, as you said, that they have Osimhen, who, despite everything, was injured for, I think, most of the first half, an injury to his hand. But apart from that, do you think that there could have been a braver effort, Kevin, from Galatasaray's point of view to try to get a win against a Liverpool side that isn't the unbeatable side, far from it, you know?
Definitely. Especially since the first leg was 1-1, they could have, even if not win, take them to extra time, take them to penalties, shock them at home. I think 4-0 is quite undeserving result based on what Galatasaray are capable of. I think
Yeah, I would agree with that because
they have quite a strong team. Like we said, Osimhen, Salai, Lemina,
Torreira.
yeah, Torreira, all. I mean, not world class, but decent enough players that can get a result against, we can say, a struggling Liverpool.
Another
Goalkeeper as
struggling,
well.
another struggling
goalkeeper.
Premier League side is Tottenham, who did win the game against Atletico Madrid, but it obviously wasn't enough after the 5-2 result away from home. So an aggregate of 7-5 in favor of Atletico Madrid. A good win for Tottenham, surely. It gives them self-belief, but also a result that gave them, I'm sure, self-belief was the 1-1 draw against Liverpool away from home. So, look, what can Tottenham do with this win in the Champions League? Do you think it can give Tudor's side a bit of a, motivational boost to kind of avoid relegation?
I hope so, because realistically, Tottenham are not a championship team. They should.
We've lost Luke there, it seems. I'm not sure what's happened, but okay. All right, now you're back, Luke. Now you're back. Yeah, you cut off after you said that Tottenham isn't a championship team. If you can continue.
Exactly. Sure. They're not a championship team, and they have their fair share of injuries. Fine, but I don't think they should be close to that position of the league. They've had a lot of problems this year and even last year with coaches and with the sporting directors and everything. I think that this game will prove to be something that they might take something from. But honestly, I don't know. With Tottenham, it's a game to game basis, and even with the result, because let's be honest, yesterday's result is a positive one for Tottenham against Atletico, but the truth is Atletico already knew that they had passed
That's
the turn against Tottenham, and they could have
But
taken
still,
it
does
easy.
it matter? Does it matter for Tudor, for example, who is off the back of two very good results, if I can say that? I mean, Liverpool away, 1 point in the 90th minute. Then there's this win against Atletico Madrid. Maybe that's just enough for his team to start to grind out results in the Premier League.
I think that it's up to Tudor now to use these two results, irrelevant of if we have to analyze the results in detail, and try to implement kind of like a mentality that, listen, let's take the positive out of these games and try to win the next games in order to avoid any risk of relegation. So I think it's up to the manager. He has a very big task ahead of him to mentally kind of put it into the players that, listen, let's take the positive and let's try to do what we can do, but we're not doing so far. So it's all up to a manager that it's really not easy, but I'm curious to see how again, it's a game to game situation to Tottenham. They might lose the next game and everything goes to.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is that Tudor, similar like with what happened with Juventus, I think you can correct me, Luke, I'm sure, because I'm a bit hazy on the details, but I think Juventus had axed their previous coach, then got in Tudor to get them into the Champions League, right? Juventus, and they managed that. They gave him a contract long enough to kind of start the new season, but then things didn't work out. So, I mean, Tudor isn't new to this whole caretaker manager thing. So, my point is maybe it could work out. Or maybe is it a matter of let's see what happens for the remainder of the season, then we'll just change coaches in Tottenham's point of view, of course.
I think that Tudor is the kind of coach that now has that kind of label on him, try to get us out of the problems that we are in. So he coached Verona, he coached Marseille, he coached Lazio, he coached Juventus, and Lazio and Juventus he came at the middle of the season. So they were not doing that well, and they gave Tudor the team to try and to be better. And obviously he accepts short contracts in order to see what will happen at the end of the season, and maybe he will stay and maybe he will go. With Lazio and Juventus, they had Sarri and they had Motta. With Sarri, it was a bit of a decision that he wanted to leave, and with Motta, he wasn't performing to what obviously Juventus expected. He was getting a lot of draws, and they brought in Tudor, which, by the way, he wasn't that bad, especially at the beginning of the season.
Exactly.
That is why he stayed on.
It's always kind of similar how Tudor starts. Like he joins a struggling club, gets them over the line, whether it is Champions League football or something like that. Then the problem comes when you start the season with Tudor as your coach, because for some reason or another it doesn't really work. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what happened even when it came to Juventus. I wasn't liking the Juventus situation with Tudor in charge. So
Tudor in a team is a presence. I mean, he doesn't take any bullshit from anyone basically, and he wants to do things his own way. I saw a better Juventus under Tudor than with Motta. But obviously Juventus were trying to compete for to go into the Champions League or the Europa League. With Tottenham, it's totally different. I mean, they're trying to not get relegated. So I mean, is it too much of a task for Tudor? I don't know. I'm really not sure.
We'll have to wait and see, and it will work with like through a game by game basis, I'm sure, for Tottenham's board of directors, judging even each result as it comes. Speaking of results, Kevin, disaster by Newcastle, 7-2 away to Barcelona, putting the aggregate at 8-3 in favor of Barcelona. So Newcastle defensively this season haven't been impressive at all. Sure, conceding 7 to Barcelona at the Camp Nou. Was it avoidable?
No, I think once you go to the Camp Nou and you're not, tactically prepared for their players. I mean, I can't. But
7 goals, Kev. 7.
Yeah, I mean, completely tore them apart. After Elanga's equalizer, I thought maybe somehow take them to extra time. If they keep building on the pressure, but then you can notice when a team shuts down completely, and when that happened, then they just ramming in goals for fun. So
for some reason or another, I don't see a lot of criticism towards Eddie Howe when it comes to Newcastle. He's always there, always appointed. Like, he's spent a good few seasons there, but I'm not impressed by Newcastle. I'm not impressed how they play in terms of defense, especially this season has been an absolute nightmare. Where are Newcastle even placed in the Premier League? I'm not even sure. 13th, something like that, is it? What? Let's see. 9th. Okay, 9th. So it's not as bad as I thought.
It's 2 points off 13th. So
yeah. It's only because they won against Chelsea, because they probably were somewhere in the 13th zone. With the players that Eddie Howe has, with the transfer spend that they've had, and he has actually managed to even complain that the strikers that he has brought in terms of Voltemade and Vissa weren't somehow up to scratch. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure if that's what he essentially said, but I don't think this is anywhere near good enough in comparison to the absolute absurd, especially in our terms, Luke, in Serie A terms, amount of money, like in summer. Like, what do you think about this whole situation? Look, should Newcastle look to change coaches at the end of the season, even seeing as Eddie Howe has a lot of tools to make this Newcastle side work? Tonali, Voltemade, Vissa, but even Bruno Guimaraes, Joe Ellington, Gordon, Elanga. This is crazy. In the Serie A, this team would be within the top 5 at least, at the very least. Can we agree on that?
No.
No. Come on, dude.
No. I think Newcastle are a good team. But I have to agree. I mean, if you bring in someone like Wiltemad and you spend that amount of money and he's not performing, I mean, okay, he's still young. He's coming from a German background where he used to play in a different league, and now he has to adapt to a different culture and lifestyle and league.
But Vissa doesn't. Vissa was playing with Brentford at the beginning of the season. I mean, he was injured for a long while, but
exactly. I was going to mention that. I think Wissa started on the wrong foot with Newcastle because he came in injured. That he didn't have time to get used to a bigger club. So these might be seen as excuses, but honestly, if I have to really be honest, and this is my opinion, I think that we tend to overrate a club like Newcastle because they in fact play in the Premier League. They are a good team. They have good players. They have a decent manager with a decent background. But let's not kid ourselves. He's not the kind of manager that's going to win you a decent amount of trophies. I think that apart from Bruno Guimaraes, Tonali,
Gordon,
these are the players.
Voltemade, Vissa. At the back, they have Botman, Chow.
But if you buy Malik Chow, who last year with Milan was their third or fourth option for that amount of money, and you get these results, I mean, something went wrong again. It's a typical Premier League club. For example, Lewis Hall is a left back now. He's a good left back. Okay, fine, but he's already being rated as 100 million player. I mean, but what have we seen from Lewis Hall for him to be deemed as that with that price tag? So
I kind of disagree though, because in the previous season we've seen Newcastle like really boss it in the Premier League. They finished, I think, in the top 4, obviously, because they're in the Champions League. I'm not sure if they actually finished 4th or not, but yeah, these players surely have more potential than what Eddie Howe is managing to show us. That is an hill I'm going to die on personally, because especially with the fact that there have been a certain number of additions in the summer that, man, I mean, compare this to AC Milan's transfer, or any Serie A kind of transfer market.
You cannot.
It's a team in the Serie A spending this amount of money would have expectations to at the very least win the league. But I mean, be that as it may, the two leagues are entirely different. But 9th is pretty terrible. Getting knocked out to Barcelona is okay. I don't think that you can, and I disagree a bit here with Kevin, that I don't think that conceding 7 times to Barcelona away from home, yes, I know it's the Camp Nou, yes, I know that Barcelona is a fantastic team. I would expect a 7-2 result if, let's go back to Panathinaikos, if Panathinaikos played in the Camp Nou last time, not Newcastle. A Premier League side of Newcastle's caliber, conceding 7 goals, 8 in 2 games, is a bit too much, personally. But
Marco, take it from a Roma fan. These amount of goals in one match, they can happen.
You'd know a thing or two about that, Luca.
No, I think that if we had to analyze the reason why these things happen, it's not just plain and simple. I think Newcastle do not have the mental capability of competing in a competition in the Champions League. They do well in the Premier League, and they can qualify for the Champions League, but then it's a different state, especially when you're trying to do well in both competitions. And you mentioned that last year they finished in the top 4 in the Premier League, but if I'm not mistaken, it's either the last year or the one before. They did not do well in the qualifying stages of the Champions League.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you that this team is doing well, but they can't compete in a decent way in both of the competitions, especially at the highest level of a European competition.
That
So
is very true, and it's a good observation because, okay, right? I mean, Serie A clubs, for example, they cannot really manage to juggle both the Serie A and
definitely.
the whatever competition there is. And now we'll jump actually to Roma, because there isn't enough squad depth maybe for Serie A teams to juggle between two competitions. And I mean, going back to Newcastle for a bit, this has happened. You're completely right that Newcastle play in the Champions League, try to do well in the Champions League, but see their Premier League, standings, and it's an absolute horror show. Then, when they actually get knocked out of the Champions League and spend a year, as will probably happen next year, when they spend a season outside of the Champions League, they'll have time to focus on the Premier League, and then I'm sure I can bet money that in the next season, Newcastle will finish at the top 4, 5, 6 for sure, because they won't have that extra competition to, focus on and prepare for. Now, let's hop over to Roma, who, against Bologna, 1-1 draw, which... all things considered, I wouldn't say it was a bad result, but Roma have now entered a phase in their kind of season where they have to juggle between two very, very, very delicate situations. Where it's a Serie A situation which has taken a hit when it comes to their standings. Roma have, after the loss against Como, have gone down to 6th, as you can see here. And now a lot hinges upon this Bologna game, which will be played today, Thursday. So, do you think it's that? Do you think Roma's spotty kind of performances recently are a direct result of their juggling two things at the same time?
Yes and no. Yes, because I think that Roma do not have such a long squad to be able to compete. Not just a long squad, because I think, for example, if we had to take the striker position for our team, Dovbyk injured, Ferguson injured, both of them, they will never play for Roma this season again. Malen is doing amazingly well, but obviously we're asking him to play every game 90 minutes. And the next player that could actually help Malen into having a few minutes of rest is Robinho Vaz, young player from Marseille. He came in January, so that's just a problem that it shows that we cannot have two Malens, in terms of performance and stats to play in these competitions. I think it would be unfair to say that we are sticking just to the Europa League now. Because we're still in the mix for top 4. It's between Juventus, Como, and Roma. Obviously, the loss against Genoa and Como, and more importantly, the draw against Juventus proved to be a big hit. But I wouldn't say that our season is now based solely on the Europa League.
It's not what I meant either. But I'm just saying that right now, given that there are two very delicate situations at play. One thing affects the other, maybe. Because especially, I thought about this earlier this morning. The beginning of the season saw Roma really in a really good spirit, good defensive record as well. Most Roma games were finishing 1-0, 2-0, something like that. The defense was completely intact. But something happened, and I think I attribute a lot of this dip in performances to that 20 minutes at the end of the Juventus game where Roma were winning 3-1 and eventually had to settle for a 3-3 draw. And since then, something kind of happened, probably in the dressing room. Could it be that,
So I was listening to the Roma's press conference yesterday with Gasperini and Wesley, and they asked him about it. What is the morale of the team right now? And Gasperini kind of looked at Wesley and he asked him, "How's the morale?" And he just burst out laughing, as in smiling, not laughing. So the morale, I think, is there. I think obviously the Juventus game proved to be of a mental,
collapse?
stunt that yeah, exactly, that affected them. But honestly, I think the Genoa game, it is all merit to Genoa because they played very well. They have a coach that we know because he coached us last year, that tactically they were amazing. So we
Yeah, I mean,
didn't play,
a loss away to Genoa is
but they're doing
fine,
quite well, right? I mean,
given the grand scheme of things. Um, I'm not sure because now, because even the fixtures that you guys had as of late weren't exactly, easy. They weren't a breeze. Yeah, away to Genoa, it's always anything can happen, especially with De Rossi, preparing a good game as he ended up doing for the 2-1 win there. And
even against Napoli, they managed to find the 2-1 goal, Napoli, at the literally
against
last minute.
Genoa, right? Uh-huh.
Exactly. So he's doing quite well. He saved them from relegation basically already.
Yeah. I mean, pretty good, and we already knew that about De Rossi, that he's a pretty good coach. But now I wanted to kind of talk a bit about the Como results, 2-1 for Como. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Wesley's red card, right? I'll just start off by saying that this was nowhere, like Wesley's challenge didn't even exist in my opinion. There was absolutely nothing, not even a foul. When I saw it live, I said this was not even a foul, but the referee actually managed to give Wesley a second yellow card where many people, I'm not sure if they were Roma fans, said that even the initial yellow card was a bit dubious. But he managed to give Wesley the second yellow card, effectively tipping the odds in Como's favor, and it ended up working. Like, Luke, what do you think? Was it a red card? I don't know.
So before we go into the red card, I want to make it clear that Roma weren't actually playing their best game against Como, because Como play fast football under Fabregas, and they are a good team. But we were 1-0 up against them, to a penalty that it was a clear penalty. The guy that fouled El Shaarawy on the penalty, in my opinion, had to have a yellow
Diego
card. Diego
Carlos, I think. Yeah. And he ended up scoring the winner, which is a crazy twist of fate as well.
Very good, very good. So I think after the red card on Wesley, which we cannot, I really don't want to go into that red card. But I'm going to go into what
the overall
comments
game.
were. No, from the VAR room basically. They now say are publishing the referee's comments.
Open VAR, right? It's called, I think.
Something like that, yeah. And I saw the VAR room commenting on the foul, and they're seeing the action where basically Wrench was the only one with contact on Diao, Como's Diao, and Wesley on a yellow card he did not touch the player, and he's saying you can see in the action that there was no contact from Wesley, and he's commenting, okay, the contact is from Wesley. He's on a yellow card. Give him so basically, it's right in front of him, and he's saying that the contact is there, and it was definitely not a red card. And what is more worrying, in my opinion, is that it is so clear, and they still made a mistake. Even referees can make a mistake, fine, but if you still make that kind of mistake, and to add insult to injury, after the game they praised the referee for his performance. which is the
My
AI.
God.
He praised his and honestly, I really again we did not play well, but also we mentioned Diego Carlos. He should have had a yellow card, in my opinion, on the penalty, and there was a last man foul from him. So, in my opinion, again, he should
There
have
I
been sent off.
disagree. Yeah, I
No,
know what you're talking about. But the ball was nowhere near Roma's attacker, so it was never going to be like if it was close. If the Roma attacker, I'm not sure who was it. Who was the guy chasing?
so if it's not a red card, it's a yellow card, Marco.
I mean, possibly.
Because if yes, then if he had the yellow card from the penalty, then he should have been sent off.
No, definitely. I'm just saying that it's not a direct red because it wasn't a clear. Like Roma's attacker was nowhere near the ball. The ball was flying way above his head before. There was no way Roma's attacker could reach the ball. So it was a yellow card for
If
sure.
if we had to compare and contrast the foul that Hummels did at a European Europa League quarter final against Bilbao, he gave him a direct red, which was less clear than what Diego Carlos did. So, and he's a European referee, so either they need to
Yeah, the referees
straight out the rules.
aren't uniform in their decisions. That's for sure. But going back to Como Roma, overall, I still think that Como was a better side. They displayed it pretty evidently against Roma. So, a 2-1 result away from home in Roma's point of view isn't the end of the world for sure. I mean, it's a result that can happen. Should
It's
there
still
be?
disappointing, obviously.
Yeah. Plus, even a result like an incident like that, just the red card, that tips the odds in Como's favor. Like at the time Roma were struggling. It was a 1-1 still result. Like Roma was on the back foot. Como was all over Roma from what I could see, and then that red card was the actual kind of cross on the game, which said, okay, yeah, I knew what was going to happen. Then I think even most Roma fans probably could anticipate what would happen then, because a team in 10 men away against Como. Kevin, I'm not sure if you've seen Como this year, but
I've watched
Como are
a
an
few games
absolutely
against them.
relentless side.
I wanted to ask, why do you think they're doing so well? I mean, they have good players. They have, Nico Pads, obviously, but
To be honest, I'll say my opinion before passing it on to Luke. I think that Fabregas is the answer to everything. Because the players, I don't think that they're that good, except for Nico Pats, who is the standout player, obviously. But Fabregas has created such a special concoction there in Como, and he's managing to show some really beautiful attacking football, and even defensively Como are among the best in Europe this season as the stands in defense. So even the supporters, even the stadium is beautiful. The supporters are full of enthusiasm now. It's a very, very good situation, and even towards the end of the Como Roma game, I saw the stands and everything, and supporters were chanting Nico Paz's name. They're chanting Fabregas' name. They are so in love of the whole thing and the whole situation. Like, Fabregas has created such a special thing with Como now that it's really impressive, and I can only dream of seeing something similar to that at Milan. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, Luke, what you think about what is the source of Como's success, but I think Fabregas has a big responsibility there.
I think Como are the most exciting team in Serie A right now. I mean, they were in Serie B last 2 years ago, and they had the same coach. I think Fabregas, yes, he was linked to Roma last year instead of Gasperini, and
he was close to Inter.
I don't want to. Exactly. Yes. But obviously, he had his reasons to stay at Como. It's a project that they are thinking about a new stadium, and so yeah. And by the way, they are the richest club in Serie A. I mean,
Yeah.
money-wise they spent and they will continue to spend. I think that 70% is Fabregas. Agreed. I think that they were able to spend quite a good number of money on players that will prove to be the future of Como, excluding Nico Paz, because I'm pretty sure Nico Paz will finish at Real Madrid at maybe next year or something like that. But they managed to bring in Jesus Rodriguez, who is the assist leader in Serie A. He's amazing. Diao last year proved to be a good player. Now he was injured this year, but he's coming back. They gave a lot of minutes to Adai. He's an Ajax product. Baturina is a good player.
Yeah,
Kakere,
Baturina was excellent at a Croatian side. I can't remember the name right now. Dinamo Zagreb,
Zagreb.
maybe.
I think Zagreb.
I watched him play
And
against AC Milan in the knockouts of the Champions League last year. Fantastic player, but despite their spending, which relative to the Serie A still is pretty substantial, right? I still think it's extremely impressive because spending money is something that anyone can do. Even Milan have spent a big chunk of money over the years, but they had spent it not really wisely. But it's really, really fantastic how Como, where like Fabregas was granted that spend and he didn't waste the money. I mean, I'm not sure exactly which players he brought in and if every player that he brought in is doing well, but overall he is fourth in the Serie A after like being in the Serie B just 2 years back. I think I would push that 70% of Fabregas' responsibility up to a solid 90 in my opinion, because he has been it's impressive. I mean, you can tell, guys, like from how I speak about Como. I am really impressed, and I love what they're doing. I love what Fabregas is doing. And I'll even pose a question to you guys, because Fabregas, as you said, Luke, has been linked last summer to Inter, even to Roma. If Fabregas were to leave Como, which is a possibility, right? I'm going to say that he won't have near as much success as he's doing with Como right now. Let's say that Fabregas joins Real Madrid, for example, once they, finish the season with Arbeloa. Kevin, do you see Fabregas enjoy the same results, given the added pressure, obviously, that he will face at such an elite club?
I would say no, and I would agree. I think that he would not have the same results or have the same performance or effect on the team. I think when you come from a small team where it's so tight knit, all the players work for each other.
And no pressure also is something I have to say.
Exactly. I mean, you're coaching Como. I mean, what's the expectation? Win the Champions League? No. So what he's doing is already above, I think, what anyone expected. And then you go to a team like Real Madrid. What are you expected to win the league, win the Champions League, win the Copa del Rey? So I think when you're thrown into that pool, the pressure does build up. Egos come into play. Supporters, would kill you if you don't win 3 games in a row, or for example. So I would have to agree. I don't think
I was still kind of surprised, even with Alonso's whole situation and eventual sacking, how a coach that we can draw parallels as well with Alonso and Fabregas. Alonso, obviously, Xavi Alonso did a fantastic job at Bayer Leverkusen, winning them the league after, like, for the first time in their history, then joining Real Madrid, and despite not the most disastrous of situations, I'd say, I think he was second when he was sacked with Real Madrid. Still, from what I could tell, Real Madrid under Xabi Alonso weren't playing that well, and the situation in the dressing room, as you mentioned, Kevin, with egos here and there, probably wasn't ideal. So what do you think, Luke, when it comes to Fabregas eventually leaving Como and joining a side which has more at stake, where there are a bit more requirements, kind of.
So two things. We mentioned Real Madrid. I think Real Madrid and you mentioned Xabi Alonso. It's you could be the best coach, but if the players do not like you, a certain Mbappe or Vinicius, they'll push you out basically. So I think when we're talking about Real Madrid, it's a task for us. It has to be a strong coach, and I think obviously in football nothing is guaranteed. So I can't tell you if Fabregas goes to Real Madrid, he's not going to do well. Even though he's similar to Xabi Alonso in terms of he's Spanish, but I can't tell you he's not going to do well. I think if we have to speak about Real Madrid, that's the issue, and it's clear because when Mbappe left PSG, we all know that little clip of Luis Enrique talking to Mbappe, telling him that Michael Jordan, he in the NBA, he's the leader, and you have to be the leader. And once he left PSG, they won the Champions League, they won the treble. So, with regards to Fabregas, I see him with Chelsea. If I'm being honest, if Chelsea had to sack Rosenior and they bring in Fabregas, he was a player that knows London. He played with Arsenal. He played with Chelsea. He left crying, so he was, I think, happy there. So I honestly see him at Chelsea, and I see him doing well. To be fair,
the situation at Chelsea isn't something I really like, to be honest, given the number of players that there are. But maybe it does take someone like Fabregas to gel everything together and actually try to make wiser transfers, not just transfers that follow hype and follow other factors.
Exactly. That's Chelsea's main problem. I
So
think
maybe
they see whoever is trending on Twitter and they buy him.
Yeah, that's the situation with a lot of Premier League clubs, in my opinion. And
I think it would be the same with
yeah.
Xabi Alonso going to Liverpool eventually. I think Arne Slot won't last much longer, especially if they don't, pick up this season, maybe make it to the final of the Champions League. I don't know, but I think Xabi Alonso is a player they need. Someone who played for the club, knows the club, is passionate.
We're talking about a manager shuffle, basically, because City, Chelsea, Liverpool, maybe Newcastle, they're all going to change their managers.
Yeah. I don't think Newcastle would change their manager, to be honest. I think Eddie Howe has the English get out of jail card. I think he's an English manager.
I agree, because even what I said before, guys, I don't see any criticism towards, like, as a neutral fan outsider, obviously, but I don't see enough said about Eddie Howe with Newcastle.
Because it's Eddie Howe.
Because
if it was anyone else,
I think it's because he's English. I really do think that.
His next job will be the national team.
Do you think so?
I think I think Tuchel, maybe, I don't know, England never do well, so let's say they do somewhat well, maybe he gets one more year. By the next Euros, I think it'll be Eddie Howe.
And I wanted to shift your guys' attention to Liverpool as well. We just mentioned that Slot might be on the end of a sacking if he doesn't manage to get Liverpool to the Champions League, which is, I think, one of the most basic, goals that a team like Liverpool should have. Right now, Liverpool is 5th, which would obviously qualify them for the Champions League once that extra spot is added. But with the expectations of, retaining their champions as, Premier League, champions, they are right now, they are 21 points off Arsenal. And what do you guys think? What do you think, Luke? Should Arne Slot be brought into question if he doesn't manage to... What are your expectations of Slot at the current point in time? Let's just say that.
So, funnily enough, I have been following Slot from his Feyenoord times because when Feyenoord were playing Roma once every year, he was public enemy number one. It was always Slot versus Mourinho prime time.
And he lost
and
both
he won.
times, right? 1-0, I believe.
No, he lost the Conference League final. He lost against Mourinho, and he lost against De Rossi.
3 times then.
Exactly.
Oh, I thought it was just 2.
I think tactically he's a good coach, but the pressure surrounding Liverpool is quite particular, and it's not easy to be the next guy after Klopp. And I don't think bringing in Xabi Alonso would actually fix that problem, to be fair. But I'm not sure. Liverpool are a bit of a question mark because they won the league last year, and I expected them to be better, and they spent again a decent amount of money this year, in contrast to other years. But still, I mean, I still expected them to be at least
I
top
have a
three.
bit of an opinion about Liverpool. I'm not sure if you guys will agree. I think that the only reason that Liverpool won the league last year was that they were the second best team that managed to retain form. Because last year, City, Kevin, you obviously know that City went through a very rough patch of form, which eventually ended up costing them, their chances of winning the league. It's very similar to what happened with in the Serie A in 2021, where Milan, who weren't really the favorites, were the second best team to Inter, which though managed to keep their form, keep their head, and eventually, through a miracle, I will admit, they ended up winning the league. So even when we say that, okay, Liverpool are champions, but even last year, I don't think that they were the best club. This year, I still don't think that they're the best team, but they have spent an amount of money which would very easily make them the best team in the league right now. So maybe we're going into the past a bit too much, but what do you think about my opinion that Liverpool weren't the best team last year in the Premier League? Because in my opinion, they only won the league because City managed to fumble it, if I'm being honest. Kevin, what do you think?
It was still Klopp's team by that time.
Exactly. So Slot just managed to,
Exactly.
I mean, in his defense, he managed to get the results at the end of the day, which, I mean, it should be praised that.
I think it was still a self-functioning Klopp team. The mentality, the Klopp mentality was still there. The style of play was still there. I think, Slot just came in and saw it through. And now that he's actually building his own team, like we said before, you can actually find out pretty quickly that I don't think Slot is up.
Do you think that he needs more time?
Yeah, I always think managers need some more time. Then, just changing managers doesn't really fix anything, I think.
He hasn't had a lot of time working with Isaac. Isaac has been injured more often than not. Frimpong as well. So what do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think that Liverpool should make the kind of gamble, make the gamble of keeping Slot for the next year and then, seeing what happens?
I would, I think, keep him one more year, start fresh, a brand new season, but maybe Isaac back, Frimpong back playing. He has his team, and now it's the Slot team, and we'll see what he does. And then after this year, if it's the same or worse, then maybe it's time to move on from him.
I think he's already on thin ice. Luke, I'm not sure what you think, but I have read that the board of directors aren't really fans of how Liverpool's season has, gone for now. As we said, 21 points off the top. What do you think? Would you still keep him next year?
Look, I'm all for giving a manager time because I think they deserve the amount of time. to implement their ideas. And okay, we're all talking about the Klopp team that won the league last year. So obviously, it seemed as if he did nothing almost. I mean, he won the league by 10 points last year. So it's a Klopp team that he did something last year. I believe in giving a manager time, but unfortunately, when you are a club that needs to compete in Champions League, and in order to bring in the right revenue, it's not that easy. Just give him time. So I think if he qualifies for the Champions League, keep him on. If not this year, find someone else. I'm not giving Slot time if he's not, if he hasn't at least brought the team to play in the Champions League next year. He won the league last year, and okay, he was a bit unfortunate with the Isaac. He was unfortunate, by the way. Liverpool spent a huge amount of money on a centre back, an Italian centre back that played with Parma.
Yeah, what's his name?
Leone.
Leone.
ACL.
ACL, exactly.
Mhm.
I did not expect him to play, on a constant level like Van Dijk this year, because obviously he was a purchase for the future. But
that's
if you have an
unfortunate. Yeah, I
investment,
mean,
but
especially
again,
given Van Dijk's age. I mean, he is like 34 right now, something like that. So, in the
exactly.
best case scenario, Leone would have gone in, got a few minutes in, started to try to gel together with Konate maybe, and try to build that.
Or
That
replace
dynamic.
Konate, considering that his contract is expiring.
Oh yeah,
So
that's
either
right.
way,
Yeah.
I think would have been so I was just going to say it would have been the best learning experience to play with Van Dijk and take a whole year to learn from him and then become the new Van Dijk next year maybe.
physically he's there. Physically he's very similar to Van Dijk, to be fair.
After an ACL.
No, in terms of his characteristics, his
I
height,
know, but but now,
physicality.
given that even once he returns, the players that return from an ACL injury are rarely the same players that prior to that. So I don't know, a bit unfortunate still, but I wanted actually look to ask you, because we were talking about Roma, and now, like, let's say that hopefully for you guys, you will see the better of Bologna and pass through to the next stage of the Europa League. But in terms of the league, should questions be asked of Gasperini if he doesn't manage to qualify for the Champions League, seeing as for the major part of the season, Roma were fourth? And it's only now that there's still a lot to be played, so Roma can make up the little ground that there is between them and Como. But if I were a Roma fan now, this is obviously my opinion, but I would be very disappointed in Gasperini if he spent practically the entire season fourth, and when things got a bit muddy, he'd get you guys down to sixth and away from that Champions League spot. So, again, what do you think of Gasperini so far, and if he should continue if he doesn't manage to make it to the Champions League?
So I think Gasperini was brought in to start a new Roma cycle, and you said something. If I was a Roma fan, I would be disappointed if we did not go to the Champions League. If you were a Roma fan, you definitely would not say that, because considering the players that we brought in, the FFP restrictions that we have, the amount of money that we did spend, but obviously it's still not enough. If we do not make the Champions League, it's only because there were teams that deserve it more. If we had to talk, for example, okay, let's forget Inter, let's forget Milan, let's forget Napoli, last year's Serie A winners. Let's say Como go in, not Juventus, Como. They're a team that invested well, they're playing well, they had one game a week. So,
but I'll push back on that, because, and I'm coming from like a place where I'm saying that Roma have spent, like, this is the disappointment, not that Roma wouldn't in theory qualify to the Champions League, but because that in itself, as you said, isn't the end of the world, right? Given the spending and whatever. But given that you guys have spent almost a whole season fourth, and even better than that, at times you are even second or first. Obviously, I didn't expect you guys to win the league or get a second place, third, whatever. But given that you guys have spent so much time in the top four, it would be a bit of a pity, no, to miss out on the Champions League.
I think that we are questioning Gasperini if we do not go to the Champions League. I think we were first or second because of Gasperini and how he plays. Up until January, we were one of the best defenses along with Arsenal. We were not conceding goals, but we were not scoring goals. When you have Dovbyk and when you have Ferguson that are not performing, that is a very big problem. When you have Dybala injured, when you have right now Soler, for example, he's suffering from pubalgia. So he's been out for like a month and a half, and he might return against Inter. So I think it's not that easy to just say, okay, we're not fourth. It's Gasperini's fault. I think it's the sporting director's fault that okay, he didn't have that much to work with, but he brought in players that we expected more from them. For example, Zolkowski and Gilardi
Tsimikas
are
as
centre
well.
backs. Tsimikas, for example, is a disaster. Tsimikas, it was a loan move that clearly did not work, and honestly, I would have not been surprised if he left in January. Bailey was a disaster, for example. Ferguson was a disaster, and these were players that in the Premier League, Ferguson, for example, 2 years ago, he was rated
One of
as
the
100 million
hottest
player.
prospects in the Premier League. I remember his value being in the like 70, 80 millions, and it obviously went down as the seasons went by. But
Exactly.
yeah, I still
I
think
think
that Gasperini did a good job, honestly, so far. He's 3 points as it stands from the fourth place, which isn't the end of the world at
Exactly.
all.
And I think that okay, it's easy to just find excuses in injuries, but the Bala obviously it's been very common for him to get injured in the last few years. So this might be his last year. Angelino was suffering from something that till this day. Last year, in my opinion, he was the best left back in Italy alongside Di Marco.
Product, by the way.
And sorry.
City product.
Okay, fine.
Just throw it there.
No, last year he was amazing. He came from Galatasaray and it was amazing. He and this year we all, I mean, when they asked Gasperini and the team about him, he might have suffered something kind of like on the sickness level, and basically he didn't play this year, and which obviously was a big hit. But again, these are all factors that contribute to that end of the year analysis that we'll see where we'll finish, basically.
Yeah, no,
Even in the Europa League.
Yeah, speaking of the end of the year, now I'm just having a look at Roma's fixtures. They do play Lecce at home, but then things do get a bit trickier. Inter away, then there is Pisa at home, which is okay, but then there's Atalanta, Bologna, Fiorentina, which is a side that obviously have to get as much points as they can. Then there is the derby against Lazio, and it finishes things off with Verona away. So,
No, playing in the Serie A is easy. I mean, all the teams that you mentioned are all weak teams in a weak league, so we should get past by them very easily. No, I think
Okay.
on paper, I think if you have to see even Como's fixtures, I think that on paper they are the favorites to go for fourth place. To be fair,
Yeah,
not even
I've heard
Juventus.
that actually.
So,
I've heard that. Yeah.
and
So,
again, we might be the only team playing in Europe, by the way. So it gets even trickier if we had to pass.
yeah, exactly. I mean, Como do have an easier fixture list here, but still, I mean, given how they're playing, it's really, and the fact that they obviously don't have any obligations, they do have, it has to be said, that they do have the return fixture against Inter in the Coppa Italia, yet to play 0-0 still there, but you know, I do like them for at least an Europa League placement. But yeah, so
They deserve
yeah, of course, I'd agree. Let's close things off here with a bit further up the table, but not by that much. Milan basically losing to Lazio in a game where it really caught most people off guard, seeing as, and even you, Luke, might have something to say about this, that Lazio are having a nightmare of a season. Obviously, mid-table, no objectives whatsoever. But you wouldn't have said that given the incredible amount of support that was shown in the when it comes to supporters in the game against AC Milan. I've never seen anything like that, and I'm not saying that the Milan loss was as a result of the whole, Lazio support, like for some reason everyone returning to the stadium. In the previous fixture before that, Lazio had a total of around 2,000 people, guys, in the Olimpico to watch. I'm not sure which game was played there, but for the game against AC Milan, I think it was like 50 or something thousand. The supporters were raising their scarves all around. It was incredible. The support was absolutely insane. I was really impressed by them, to be honest. Even by the way they played. I'm not sure who of you watched the game. Now, I'll start talking about Milan. Maybe you guys can fill the gaps, because obviously I might be a bit biased in some way or another, but I didn't like Milan. I thought that their approach, Milan's approach has always been the same throughout the season. It's, start the first half, try not to concede a goal, and then in the second half, try to raise things up a notch and eventually grab that winning goal. That obviously didn't happen. It didn't go according to plan, given that Milan conceded within the 60th minute to Isaksen. So obviously that changed the dynamic of the game, but still I was very disappointed, especially given that Inter had drawn their game to Atalanta 1-1. So that a win for Milan would have meant just a 5-point gap at the top, which would have clearly shifted the whole dynamic and made things a lot more interesting. Like as it is now, that's 8 points separating Milan and Inter. So, Kevin, I know that you were watching the game, at least in the first half, for sure. But what did you think? I'm sure you didn't see a lot of Milan, because in the first half, Milan were all over the place, in my opinion.
I didn't see much of it, but yeah, from what I've seen of Milan in the past, I was a bit surprised. Like, wow, this is not the Milan that is how they're expected to perform. Also, some players like Leao, for example.
Leao, the situation with Milan right now is very strange, because we're playing a 3-5-2, which is usually a 5-3-2, if we're being honest. Now, as the two strikers up front against Lazio, there was Leao and Pulisic, who are both not strikers, not in that way. Both of them are wingers. Imagine you're playing wingers as the two main focal points of your attack. It just doesn't work. Leao, despite his height, doesn't manage to compete physically with the likes of Hila, for example, from Lazio, who played an absolute incredible match, I have to say. And Pulisic, who has, after his return to injury, hasn't even scored so far in 2026. So, look, what did you think of Milan's attack? Do you think that Allegri is lacking in this case, in this context?
I wouldn't say he's lacking, because Allegri is Allegri. We all know, his philosophy, and he's the manager that this year has done very well against the big teams, and then against the small teams, he tends to struggle. I mean, not he per se, but
This team, yeah.
AC Milan in general. I saw them against Lazio. I think Sarri set out the team to be a team that could really do well against Milan. Against a defensive team like Milan. I think that Sarri is a good coach, even with the disastrous season that he has had in terms of Lotito and
Yeah,
the fans
they
not
had
showing
a
up
kind
and the
of
stage.
shutdown in the summer transfer market. They didn't actually manage to, weren't able to, I think, bring in players. Even in January, supporters were really, really angry at Lotito for not bringing essentially anyone important in. If anyone, I can't remember if they actually signed someone in January. But
So the story is that Sarri was brought in the summer, and a few weeks after he was officially the Lazio coach again, they told him that they had a transfer ban and due to financial problems. And then in January, that transfer ban was lifted, and they sold more players than they brought in.
right,
They
yeah.
sold Ganduzi, they sold Castellanos, they brought in Taylor, they brought in Ratkov. So yeah, I think honestly, I'm a Roma fan, and it's very difficult to praise anything that goes with Lazio. But I think Sarri is a good coach, and he's doing a fantastic job considering what he has to work with.
To be honest, if we take the three head-to-head results this season between Sarri and Allegri, so Allegri won the first game, 1-0 at home in the San Siro. Then Sarri got the better of Allegri twice. 1-0 in the Coppa Italia, a very similar game to the one we saw last weekend, and another 1-0 win against, again against Allegri in the league this time. So maybe Sarri is Allegri's kryptonite because, to be honest, I really, really was impressed by Lazio's setup, how they approach and how they even managed to target the weak side of Milan, which is a Stupinian's flank, unfortunately, which eventually in the 6th minute was what conceded, was what really tipped the scales in favor of Lazio. So mm, again, I was very disappointed because my friend told me was keeping me up to date last Saturday about with in terms of Inter's result 1-1. There was a lot of talk about now we'd get to -5, but I told him yeah, -5 if we beat Lazio away from home, which is no easy task. Now I'll shift things to Inter because Inter now have 8 points as an advantage at the top despite their not really good results as of late. So do you think that despite their, lack of results, especially with Thuram kind of not finding his goal-scoring boots on and Lautaro Martinez currently injured, do you guys think that Inter still have the league in the bag given their 8-point advantage?
For sure.
I think so, from what I've seen from Inter this season. And how many games are left in Serie A?
9.
8, 9, 10,
9
9.
games. Yeah.
Okay, and it's 8
No,
points.
I think
Yeah.
it's the league is ready. I think it was never. To be fair, this league is giving me Leicester vibes. Leicester, they deservedly won the Premier League, but no one showed up to give them a bit of a challenge. And honestly, I think Inter this year they deservedly will win the league, but realistically, neither Napoli, neither Milan gave them that challenge.
That
If I'm being
challenge,
honest.
yeah, yeah. To be honest, again, I do agree that they're the best team in the league, even though if you just took the head-to-head encounters with the top few teams, you wouldn't really notice that, because they have only beat, as we'll take the top 6 right now, they've beaten Como 4-0 at home, and they have beaten Juventus with the, big can of worms, obviously, but they did beat Juventus at home 3-2. But the rest, they lost to Napoli, lost to Milan, lost to Juventus away from home, and they beat Roma, has to be said, 1-0. But does that matter? Should Inter fans care that they haven't beaten most of the top sides if it means that, they just end up winning the league anyway?
I think winning the league is winning the league. And I'm contradicting myself because I always say that Arsenal are scamming the league, how they win the games. But at the end of the day, 3 points are 3 points. You get them how you get them, against who,
Exactly,
doesn't matter.
against who?
So doesn't
Because
matter.
I've seen, maybe this is copium a bit, but I've seen a lot of Milan fans say that, oh, okay, it's the first time in a very, very long while where the eventual Serie A champions wouldn't have won against the usual top four, which is Inter, Juventus. Actually, now given that they have beaten Juventus, I mean that record is off. But actually, no, this is the record. I have a mistake because this is the first time that Inter would have won the league when still losing both derbies against AC Milan. It has the last time it happened was in the 40s, 50s, 60s, something. So, and many Milanisti were saying, oh, you know, they're kind of using it as a kind of gotcha moment when it comes to Inter fans. But I was always of the opinion. I agree, Kevin. It is what it is. If the points come in method X or method Y, if that means winning the league, and I really don't care how it comes. But I still think that some questions will have to be answered next season when it comes to Kivu. Luke, I'm not sure what you think, but I don't think it's possible for Inter to lose most of their top 4-5 encounters. I don't think it's possible for Inter to concede 5 goals to Bodo Glimt in total in 2 games. So, do you think that Kivu should be? Does he have questions to answer? You know, maybe even next season when the slate is clear.
To be fair, not really, because Kivu is a young coach that took over the team when they lost massively to PSG in a Champions League final. I'm still convinced that Inter lost to Bodo Glimt because mentally that 5-0 loss in a final still, is still in their mind.
I
Because
don't agree, to be honest.
I agree completely, because I do not think that if you are Kievo, you just took the team from Inzaghi, you're just starting. I think the most important thing for you is to do well in this case in the league. So you're bringing in the league, you're already a winner, and I don't say I do not care about the Champions League, but the thing about winning the league in your first year and trying to reset after you have lost in the Champions League in that way, I think that is what happened to Inter, if I'm being honest.
Against
I do not
Bodo
think
Glimt specifically, you're saying?
exactly, because I think that Inter tries to. Okay, so let's break it down. They lost to City 3 years ago, 4 years ago. How long was that?
Something like that.
They lost last year to PSG, a 5-0 loss, biggest loss in a Champions League final. And if you are Kiev, you're just starting out, and you say, listen, I'm going to win the league this year. Mentally focus on the league. The Champions League, if we do well, if we win, fine. But if not, just forget it. And I think mentally they were set on winning the league. They might win the Coppa Italia. And, that stint against Bodo Glimt, I mean, it happens. I mean, that is what I think. And obviously, I think Kivo was not in question. He will remain there. He mentally he changed the players because.
No, I'm sure that Kivu will remain there even next year, obviously, especially if he wins the league. But I am still not convinced that Kivu is the man for Inter right now, especially for a few things. One, the fact that whenever any whenever a solid team faces Inter, Kivu is at a complete loss. Doesn't manage to read the game well, doesn't manage to prepare the team well, both tactically and motivationally. And it just shows, guys, Inter have lost or drawn most of their encounters with the top 5-6 sides. Also, like, part of this is the fact that when he was brought into question against Bodo Glimt, he still didn't manage, because I saw the whole game, Inter versus Bodo Glimt, where it was played in San Siro, and I had big expectations. I thought that Inter were going to be all over Bodo Glimt, shots, saves, crossbars, everything, penalties. I thought that Inter were going to be all over them completely. But within 15 minutes, I actually understood Inter's game plan immediately. Just use Di Marco, send in crosses to Pio Esposito and I think it was Thuram, yes, it was Thuram playing, and just try to get a header or even maybe get a penalty or something. And that was the game plan. That was it. I didn't see, especially then after obviously the killer was Akanji's mistake when it came to eventually Bodo Glimt's going in the lead. But
Ex-City.
ex-City has to be said, eh?
City product.
Why did even Akanji even leave City, Kev?
Time, mostly.
Game time.
He wasn't getting in. I mean, Gvardiol changed from left back to center back in that period as well. So yeah, he didn't really have.
And it's also a bit funny that Akanji was kind of linked to Milan before he was eventually linked to Inter, and he didn't choose Milan because Milan weren't obviously gonna play in the Champions League, and Inter were. And it's kind of funny, especially funny for me as a Rossoneri fan, that he ended up costing Inter their hopes of passing through to the next phase of the Champions League, because his mistake, which again, personally, I think it was one of the most atrocious mistakes you can commit as a defender, playing like a very cheap ball given away to, Bodo Glimt's player. But yeah, going back to Inter, okay, fair enough. League One this year, very good. It's not a given, obviously, that you'd win the league, especially with a new manager. But if I were an Inter supporter, I would still have, some doubts on Kivu. Maybe Kivu will improve next year, but as you said, Luke, this year Kivu did not have any rivals. He just did not. And even when one rival was brought into question and was tasked with winning to kind of close the gap to 5 points, I'm obviously talking about Milan, there was nothing in terms of Milan showing that they do actually have it in them to kind of compete for the title. So really and truly, Inter did not have any rivals whatsoever this season. And still, should this take from Kivu winning practically every single game against smaller clubs, quote unquote? Absolutely not. I think that is absolutely insane. Really impressive, to be honest. Even the fact that he managed to almost always get 3 points against sides that, really were a pain in the side for Milan, for example, where Milan, as you said, Luke, again, just managed to confront the top sides of the league very well, but eventually shot themselves in the foot in terms of, drawing or even losing to sides that don't, on paper, shouldn't have posed as much of a challenge. So, Kevin, what do you think? Would you, as an Inter fan, considering what Inter have, how Inter have, played their season so far, as Luke said, they are still in contention for the Coppa Italia. The league is mostly sealed. But given all that, do you think that you would have a few doubts about Kivu if he were to, obviously stay, which he probably will?
Oof. I don't know. I mean, I think especially if he does win the league this year, okay, minus being eliminated, Champions League and all that. But I think if you win the league in Italy, I think it's a very big achievement, especially if also considering he didn't beat, like you said, the top teams to get there. But maybe
Can I change the question just a little bit? If we had to compare this to the Premier League, so what if Kiev wins the league this year and next year he's still there and okay, and he's not doing as well as this year? Could we say that this year's Inter is Inzaghi's team, the same that we're saying about Slot and Klopp?
Definitely.
Yeah, I would have to apply the same logic. Yeah,
Definitely,
he,
because I mean, Inter have
Mhm.
he basically inherited even most of the mechanisms that Inzaghi used to use. I mean, Inzaghi, as straight to what a lot of Inter supporters have said, because I have spoken to a lot of Inter supporters who are really furious with Inzaghi's tenure as a coach. Despite that, mostly because of the obviously two final Champions League finals lost, and especially I'd say when it comes to losing the league to AC Milan and again to Napoli a few years later. So, despite all that, though, I still think that Inzaghi created a very special team at Inter. It is a very special team, even because of how good they were. Last year they competed on all fronts. Guys, they competed for the league, competed for the Coppa Italia, and competed for the Champions League. And now, this is a very interesting question I wanted to ask both of you. Most Inter fans at least, making a bit of a generalization, most Inter fans see that, sure, they competed on all fronts, right, last year, but they ended up failing on all fronts. Would you prefer competing on all fronts or just not competing on all fronts and eventually secure, for example, in Inter's case, the Scudetto, for example, and then leave the Champions League for whatever happens and the Coppa Italia for whatever happens? But do you prefer competing on all ends or just one and make sure that that one you compete for is in the bag?
Good question. I don't think that any team has the capability to compete in so many competitions at the same time that are all so different. You can't, I mean, playing in the Champions League is totally different than playing the Premier League. Same with the FA Cup, etc. So I think that has to come internally. So the team would figure out its goal. Okay, we want the Champions League. Like PSG, for example, they made it a point to win the Champions League. So I think they focused more on the Champions League, and then obviously the league is what it is in France, so they ended up winning that as well. So I would prefer if, let's say, City focused on the league, and then if it happens that the Champions League goes well, then you maybe start shifting a bit of focus on that as well. But let's win the league if that's the most important for the club at the time, which I think in City's point of view it is right now. So let's focus on the Premier League, and then we'll see what happens with the Champions League.
I
Because
mean,
even if
yeah, because if you try to expand your net and try to, okay, say, all right, let's just try and go for it on all ends, as Inter did last year. I personally, I still would want that. I still want my team to compete on all fronts and take every single competition seriously, even if it means losing each and every one of them, as Inter ended up doing. What do you think, Luke? Do you share my opinion, or do you think that you'd prefer if, for example, one competition would be given more importance compared than the other?
I think realistically, if you have a manager that wants to implement a winning mentality, he will tell you that no competition is more important than the other. I think Gasperini is trying to do this year. No, I will not rest a player in the league and in order to play him in the Europa League. So I think it's easier said than done, but I think that's what I believe, that you cannot give importance to a competition rather than the other one. But from experience, Mourinho's spell at Roma, he won the Conference League. He finished at a disaster of a final in the Europa League with Sevilla. And in the meantime, we were finishing 7th in the Serie A. With Fonseca, it was a similar case. We're trying to do well in Europe, and on Thursday, you know that your Roma has a chance to do well, but on Sunday, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to being realistic with the players and the numbers that you have, and come March, April, May, if you opt for one competition rather than the other. I mean, Mourinho, in his last year, when we played the Europa League against Sevilla, in the league we weren't that amazing. But if we won, and if we had a fair referee in Anthony Taylor in that final, if we had won it, would have been a Champions League team. It's like finishing at least fourth in the Serie A.
Yeah.
I get why they would opt for one competition other than the other. It's being realistic, really.
Especially when it comes to Serie A sides who don't have enough firepower to compete on all ends.
I
But
just think also just
yeah.
to add, I think just it's a domino effect as well. I mean, players then start playing so many games in a week, then you get fatigue, you get injuries, and then let's say I'll talk about City. Oh, we lost Haaland, whatever injury. Then that's directly going to affect the league, and then that's going to directly affect the cup, and so. I think
mean,
it
in
is
theory,
really-
that's why you should have a good squad depth like Arsenal do this year. Like Arsenal this year, guys. I'm not sure if you've paid a lot of attention, but they do have serious squad depth. They have players who don't play in the league like Eze, but as we've seen yesterday, they can still manage to just play him in the Champions League and play a star. Because I'm a bit biased here. I love Eze as a player, but still, if you have someone of that caliber on the bench, ready to just step in when everyone else is injured or fatigued, that's a big advantage to have over other teams competing in the Champions League. For the Serie A, it's a bit different because of the big constraints when it comes to.
It's not a bit different. It's ridiculously different. You can't compare. I mean, Nottingham Forest after winning the championship, they spent more than the Serie A 2 years ago, and now they are a Europa League team that might get not in the top 10 this year. So you can't compare.
Might actually get relegated too.
I
they
mean,
only
yeah.
have 11 players basically that can play, and get results.
But they bought 22 players 2 years ago.
But
22 players.
not to the level of first team football, I would say. So they keep playing the same 11 in the league, in the Champions League, or in the Europa League. And yeah, knocked out, might get relegated. So, like you said, Marco, if a team has the squad depth.
This is
then it's
interesting,
more-
like even to see, like for Milan, if Milan qualify for the Champions League, which is not a given as many people seem to think, but it's still there's still a big chance of obviously Milan getting into the top four. But what's interesting is seeing how Milan will prepare for their Champions League performances, because right now in the league, even in the league, like Milan are struggling to field 11 sane, non-fatigued players. Imagine if the same team had to compete in another competition. It would be an absolute disaster, and the league would obviously suffer. We'd be nowhere near second if we were in the Champions League or even Europa League, whatever it is. So a lot of thought has to be put into this, and a lot of signings have essentially to be made. Look, do you think that Milan are in a position financially to, granted that they play in the Champions League next year, are they in a position to add new players to their roster to be able to compete on that end as well?
I think the only way how they could basically have the right amount of funds to bring in the right players to also play in the Champions League is by selling Leao. I think it's time that they move on from Leao, they sell him, they bring in the right players for Allegri, and they might have a chance to do well in the league and in the Champions League. But to be fair, let's say if the top four right now had to go into the Champions League next year, I'm calling it right now. I'm pretty sure that if Inter, Napoli, Milan, and Como were to play in the Champions League next year, it is going to be, in my opinion, a disappointing year for Italian teams, because Como do not have the right mentality and experience and the right maybe numbers to compete in the two teams. It happened with Bologna.
Especially if
happened with
Fabregas
Newcastle.
leaves, by the way, just a little.
Exactly.
Probably as well by that time.
Milan, I'm not sure. Allegri has the experience, but does he have the team to compete? Napoli, Conte, it's as if he's a Serie D coach when it comes to European fixtures.
What a
And
disaster this year, Conte, in the Champions League, guys. Napoli were
it's
their
always a favorite
current
one.
Serie A champions, and they were getting tossed around in the early stages of the Champions League like I don't know what. I can see a big struggle for Italian teams next year in the Champions League.
Agreed.
Juventus maybe would pose a better threat than I'd say Como and Milan and even Napoli in the Champions League, because despite their whole situation, even this year, Juventus still managed to at least try to compete towards to a solid point in the Champions League. Not anything impressive, but at least they did make it in the knockout phases. Then obviously there is the potential of Roma in the Champions League. How do you think they do in the in that competition?
I if I have a clear idea of Roma next year's Roma, if I'm not mistaken, we have to sell around 60 million in order to comply with financial fair play regulations.
Even if you guys make it in the Champions League?
If we make it in the Champions League, it helps our case. But if I'm not mistaken, we still need to sell that amount of money.
Wow.
Ranieri made it clear last year that this year is going to be a difficult financial year because we have too many problems with regards to the wages. So Champions League football would help Roma. I honestly think that we would do better than, for example, Como in the Champions League, because we are more ready to play mentally in that type of competition. I'm not telling you that we're going to
before.
exactly. And to be fair, if you had to see Roma's spell recently, let's say in the last 5 years, in the last 6 years, we did quite well in Europe. Okay, it wasn't the Champions League, but we still did quite well.
The Champions League is a different,
exactly,
situation, look, though.
And we need to have a team. We need to have the right financial capabilities to bring in a good team for Gasperini and Roma. If we had to, even if we play in the Europa League, we still need to set our team right. It goes both ways. So we have to see the financial side of the team before we actually do.
As a last talking point, I'm just going to mention, like, Bologna, even this season, like, played in the Champions League for the first time, I think, in its history, right? And they didn't do a terrible job. They didn't qualify, of course, for the knockout stages. But was it this year or the year before?
It was last year.
No, last year. Yeah. They made it to the Champions League for the first time in their history. Or no, not in the first time in their history. I think they had done it before. But my point is that despite their Champions League situation, that they eventually ended up playing some very interesting games, now we're seeing in the Europa League they're there, but in the league, again, this is the same situation. In the league, they are, let me see, they are 8th, and they have been further down than that. And that's, again, speaking to the whole challenge of especially Serie A sides, where if you decide to do well in the Champions League, that's always going to be at the cost of your Serie A standings. And I can see Como struggling a lot, and let me try to be as neutral as possible here. Or let's say that I'm a Serie A fan, like true and would hope that, for example, Como or any other side would go into the Champions League. I would prefer Juventus or Roma or even Atalanta, who are currently placed 7th, but they're 4 points away from Roma right now. So no European football for them as it stands, but I'd prefer those teams to Como, even because of their experience playing in Europe. And, maybe the case could be made that Como need to start playing in Europe to start creating that heritage in Europe. What do you think, Kevin, about that? Do you think that, let's say that Fabregas stays for next year, do you think that Como would do well in the Champions League?
I mean, you never know. They could be the Bodo Glimt of next year and make it all the way, or they be the lesser team that just gifts teams points. You never know. But I think that I think if they keep, I mean, I would say keep Nico Pads, but I'm sure there are other.
Let's just say that they keep Fabregas. Even if they keep, especially if Fabregas remains, guys. Como right now are the most European Serie A side I can think of in the way they play, fast-paced, intensity all the time, really impressive, and I think that can translate well in the Champions League. Luke, do you think if Fabregas stays, which is a very big if, of course, do you agree that Como would be a solid team in Europe?
I think that their way of playing could prove to be better in Europe. In the Champions League, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that if they qualify for the Champions League, they will have carte blanche to buy players. So I think they'd be a strong team in terms of bringing in the right players for Fabregas. But on the other hand, let's flip it around. If Como had to finish in a Conference League place and they qualify for that competition, I think that that European experience could prove to be better for them rather than just throwing them into the Champions League. And honestly, they might actually end up in the semi-final, for example. So in contrast, if they had to end up in the Conference League, I think that they would do better even to bring in that experience.
Instead of like throwing them towards the deeper end of the pool into the Champions League. And interesting observation.
With Bologna as well. They finished 5th when Roma finished 6th for just a few points. After a good season with Zirkzee, with Motta, then the coach left, then Zirkzee left, and they did not do well in the Champions League, and they did not do that immensely well in the league. So I mean, it's natural for that to happen to these teams, right?
Yeah. And on that note, guys, I think it's a wrap up here. We've almost been 2 hours now, guys. Huh? So as a first episode, I think this is it. Thank you guys for sharing your intellect, right? And we'll speak again in the second episode. So see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.